Dictionary gives us this scripture reading from the 14th chapter of Luke. On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him very closely. When he noticed how the guests chose places of honor, he told them a parable. When you're invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor, in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host. And the host who invited both of you may come and say, "Give this person your place." And then in disgrace, you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, your host may say to you, "Friend, move up higher," and you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. He also said to them, to the one who had, he said also to the one who had invited him, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return and would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." May God add a blessing to the reading, the hearing, the understanding, and the living of this word. Welcome to Church on the Lawn. So far, there's no rain. We had a Catholic seminary intern several years ago. She told us that her church had an annual outdoor service they called Mass on the Grass. I'm not sure that's the appropriate name, but it's nice to invite everybody here. It's nice to do this out on the lawn for a lot of reasons. We can enjoy the fleeting summer warmth. We're really glad that it's not 90 degrees and humid like it was yesterday. We can be a bit more relaxed than we can be in the sanctuary. We can mingle among the birds and the bunnies. St. Francis would be proud. We can let our mind wander and not worry about what we're looking at or hearing. I can be barefoot because this is holy ground. We can remember that we're part of a wider community, the kind that has students and buses and construction sites beginning new possibilities. But most important, we can extend the invitation to all who see us and all who we see. I like being on the grass. I like taking my shoes off and doing things a little bit differently. The best part about doing this from a preacher's perspective is that it might encourage people to look at God or at the world with new eyes. We can't sit in our normal seats in the sanctuary, and there's no reserved seats here on the lawn. Who knows? With new people who are in and around us, maybe they ought to have the first pick of seats anyway. In Luke's gospel, Jesus uses a meal to teach something about what God is like, and he uses it all the time. Jesus goes over to Zacchaeus' house for lunch. A father throws a big party for the prodigal son, and they all eat the prized calf. And today, Jesus talks about being invited to a wedding party. I'm presiding at two very different weddings in the coming 2 weeks. The first will be held next week at a winery, and the second will be here at UBC in the sanctuary during a Sacred Harp singing. One's an opposite-sex wedding, and the other is a same-sex wedding. One couple has been together 5 years, the other couple has been together 26 years. One of the things that confounds people is the seating arrangements at both the weddings and the receptions. The wedding's a lot easier. The seats are fixed. The reception with a sit-down meal is often a lot more of a logistical nightmare. Who can sit with whom? Who needs to steer clear of whom? And then there are the people who wait until the last minute to return their RSVPs, throwing the whole seating chart into disarray. I don't know of anybody who does that. It's all so formal and so filled with pent-up expectations. A funeral seldom has that kind of problem. Everyone's there and everyone's sharing in grief. But in a wedding, the etiquette problems multiply. It's just the way it is. Maybe because people spend so much time dreaming of the day and they want to make it just right. You don't spend so much time dreaming about your funeral. Jesus used the familiar difficulties with wedding seating as a parable for the way that we treat each other. He encouraged people not to rush to the best seats, and the letter of Paul to the Corinthians, Paul criticized the early church for not waiting for everybody while they eat. The rich and those at leisure can get there in plenty of time. Those who are poor couldn't get there, though. Not only that, but only the unclean couldn't sit with the righteous clean. Paul said that we were waited for everybody before we can eat, and it didn't matter who was clean or unclean. That's how important everybody is. In ancient times, the rich always got the best seats, period. If you were seated at a certain place and someone of greater stature arrived, you were obligated to give up your seat to that person. Kind of like a southern bus. Kind of foolish, isn't it? Imagine that happening in a wedding you've been at and being asked to give up your seat. But that's the way it was. If you think about it, it's not all that different from what happens in the economic and political world these days. Someone with more influence gets the better job, the better contract, the better standing in the world, and the one who used to hold that place doesn't get it anymore, and they're pushed aside. Here we are, sitting on the lawn. We're staying comfortable. We're not so concerned about the seating arrangements. Not here. But Jesus adds yet another aspect to the feast. In today's parable, Jesus says, when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. We're a welcoming and affirming church. We know that. It says it on our signs and everything. We're supposed to welcome everyone, and we like to think that we're doing that. But what if the day has passed for inviting people to come to church? I mean, we offered root beer floats here on the lawn with the Methodists the other day, and people actually walked across the street so they wouldn't get our cooties. Not everyone, but I mean, some people liked actually root beer floats, but some people. We need not assume that people will want to come to see us just because we're so great. Maybe people are righteously suspicious of religious folks. What if people don't want to buy what we're selling? There's a lot of talk in denominational headquarters about the church needing to be missional. Meaning the church missions ought to not be so much about growing the local church, but doing mission out there. And they act like it's a new idea. It's what we've been doing for years. And that's why we have a presence at the Capitol and have had it a good bit this past year. That's why we're organizing, some of us, against military strikes in Syria. That's why we're part of the Interfaith Campus Coalition at the U. That's why we advocate for housing and food for the hungry. That's why we travel to Nicaragua to be with our sister church. We do some great things. But maybe we still need to focus some energy on the people who will never cross the street and never enter into a sanctuary or even a yard. Maybe we need to meet them where they are. I think that's what Jesus was getting at when he criticized people for worrying about the seating charts at holy services when poor folk were hungry, when people are gassed a world away, when too much of the city goes hungry, when people die for lack of love. There's an Irish poet who just died last week. His name was Seamus Heaney. Hear these words that he said a few years ago. Human beings suffer, they torture one another. They get hurt and get hard. No poem or play or song can rightfully right a wrong inflicted and endured. The innocent in gowls beat on their bars together. A hunger striker's father stands in the graveyard dumb. The police widow in veils faints at the funeral home. History says, don't hope. On this side of the grave. But then, once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice can rise up, and hope and history rhyme. So hope for a great sea change on the far side of revenge. Believe that a further shore is reachable from here. Believe in miracles and cures and healing wells. Call the miracle self-healing, the utter self-revealing double take of feeling. If there is fire on the mountain or lightning and storm, and a God speaks from the sky, that means someone is hearing the outcry and the birth cry of new life at its turn. It's our job to seek out the lost and to bring them home, to welcome the traveler home, as the song says. by making this place a home for students during their tenure at the U and for all of our homes. In God's economy, no one's left out, no one's left behind, no one's told they were the wrong race, the wrong sex, the wrong sexual orientation, the wrong nationality, the wrong age. No one is told they don't have enough money. God doesn't worry about social standing, and God turns social standing on its end. God says that all are welcome to the table, all are welcome in heaven, all are welcome in church, especially those who are not welcome before. We're beginning the new church year. We started it last week, and throughout the year we're looking at the concept of holy now, recovering the sacred. This month we're looking at sacred community. A sacred community welcomes all. A sacred community exercises great table manners. It's not about which fork we use. It's about the attitude of welcome that pervades our feast. We feast and give thanks because we have bounty from God. And we dare in this beautiful place to imagine that all people are sacred. This earth is sacred. This journey is sacred. These hands, these faces, these feet, these hearts are sacred. And they deserve honor. It's not about who's seated here. It's about how we encounter each other. That's what makes us sacred. My friend and colleague, Ann Keeler-Evans, wrote this: "Staying present to this life is not the easiest thing for us to do. And yet, why else are we here? If not to bear patient and loving witness and to engage whole-souledly and joyously in this brief ride we are given. Let's consider when to stop and stay and when to work, when to go to work and when to stop and stay. How to keep breathing so our brain is clear and so our heart can discern our duty to love and peace. As we talk of sweet peace, let us sit under the arbor and share the rich bounty of September's harvest." We welcome students and others to this community of faith, and we give others the seats of honor today. When it comes time for our meal, we will rush to be the last ones, not the first ones. Jesus gives an open invitation to us all. May we do the same with anyone and everyone we meet. That's just good table manners. Amen.